Hi, and welcome to a new episode of TLDR, CISPA's podcast series. In case you're tuning in for the first time and have no idea who we are, CISPA is a German research institution within the Helmholtz Association, and we are researching all aspects of information security and AI. We are located in the lovely city of Saarbrücken, not far from the French border. We named our podcast TLDR because that is short for Too Long Didn't Read. We want to save you the hassle of reading long research papers yourself. So we talk to our researchers once a month and try to get them to explain their work in a way that you can understand it without having to be a cybersecurity expert. My name is Tobias Ebelshäuser from CISPA's Communication Department, and joining me today is Professor Andreas Zeller, who has been at CISPA since its inception. Andreas is one of the few researchers to have been awarded with not only one, but 2 ERC Advanced grants by the European Research Council, the second one just a few days ago. So let me just cut this introduction short and congratulate you, Andreas. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Tobias.
I think it would be great if you could just shortly introduce your work yourself. So what research area are you working in?
So in general, I'm working in the field of software engineering, which is concerned with building and maintaining large software. And in there, a bit more specifically, I am concerned with analyzing and testing software. That is to find out when your software doesn't work and why it doesn't work. And in this context, I'm also working in the field of so-called test generation. That is, we are creating synthetic data, synthetic inputs for programs in order to see whether there are any bugs in there which would not be found by normal inputs as created by humans.
Okay, I think we should keep that in mind because I'm sure we will get into more detail into that fairly soon. But just one question before. Let's just talk shortly about your journey with CISPA so far. As I've already mentioned, you have been here since CISPA's humble beginning. So you've witnessed us going from just a handful of people to over 440 as of today. What has that been like, and where do you think CISPA is still headed?
So the whole place Saarbrücken has always had a big growth story in terms of computer science. So I'm now here for 21 years. And in Saarbrücken, we started with something like 12 professors. We would all fit into a small seminar room. And now Saarbrücken as a whole is aiming towards 100. Most of these actually now coming from CISPA. CISPA, since its beginning in the past 7 years, has been the major driver of growth here in the area, of growth in computer science. And it is absolutely amazing to see this enormous growth in terms of people happening every day. And it's also super amazing to see that this growth does not sacrifice quality at any point. On the contrary, the applicants we get for our professor positions, for our faculty positions to be precise, and as well as the applicants we get for our PhD positions are getting more and more awesome every year. And it becomes so difficult to choose among those who already are the very best, and you can actually pick. You can actually pick among the very best. It's an absolute joy to be always surrounded by people who are, well, hopefully smarter than you, and hopefully as smart as you are. It's so much fun to work with all these folks.
That sounds like exciting times are ahead also for this podcast because, of course, we strive to get everyone on board one day. So now let's get to the actual research part. Your new project, so getting back to your future, not only CISPA's. With the ERC Advanced grant, you're now receiving 2.5 million euros over the next 5 years for your research. Can you say a few words what an ERC grant actually is and what it means for a researcher to receive one?
An ERC grant is the highest individual funding you can get anywhere in the European Union. There's 3 different levels. There's starting grants for those who are still close to their PhD. Then there's consolidator grants who are a bit further apart. And then there's advanced grants, which is sort of the Champions League in terms of as it comes to grants. And these grants are very, how can I say, very liberal. It's almost like you get a lump sum of millions of euros, which you can then spend in a very liberal way. There are no strings attached, no deliverables, very little reporting. So you can fully focus on the research that you want to do. It gives you lots and lots of possibilities and lots of independence, and this at all levels. For this very reason, they are all very coveted. People want to have such a grant. They are considered boosters of your career. To give you an idea, if you have an ERC starting grant, for instance, you get tenure in pretty much all places automatically.
Okay.
Everybody wants to have you because they are so much coveted, and it's such a prestige to have an ERC grantee within your ranks. So they are very much coveted, and this also means that the competition is fierce.
Yeah.
Which means that approximately something like 10 to 15% of the applicants actually get the grant, which is reasonable, which is something like can be compared to the acceptance rate of one of our conferences in the field, meaning that if you can regularly publish at one of these conferences, then you might think, well, then you are in the best 10%, and then you can also go for an ERC grant, because also the best 10% of grants will be accepted. But there is an important difference, and that difference is that only the best apply for such a grant. So you are not so much in a 10% league, you are more in a 1% league, or maybe even less than that, because only a very small fraction of researchers thinks themselves to be good enough to apply for one of these grants. And even among those who already are among the very best, out of this set, only a very small subset will be chosen. So meaning that if you get one of these grants, then you can consider yourself very, very lucky, and you can also say, yes, apparently at least your proposal and you as a researcher were among the very best to apply.
Okay. And so an ERC grant is set to favor higher risk, higher reward research?
Indeed. The motto of the ERC is high risk, high gain.
Yeah.
This is something that you should also point out in your grant application, in your proposal. That is, you're not supposed to do something that is incremental or that is more or less, that sounds feasible out of the box, but something that is very much out of the box, that is something that people have not thought of before, and which indeed requires a certain amount of funding in the beginning to actually explore this. And the gain of the project should be proportional to that. So meaning that you take a high risk by doing something that has never been done before. And if it works, and it's not clear that it works, if it were clear, then you wouldn't go for such research funding. And if it works, then there will be a high gain, not only for science, but even for society.
Okay. That sounds very interesting. We're going to talk about the proposal of this a little bit later on. But for now, let's get to the actual research, like your project that has now been accepted. Can you tell us what it is about and what the high risks and what the high gain is for society and for the research community?
The title of the project is Semantics of Software Systems, which we abbreviate to S3 because of the 3 S's in the title. And the title already is a bit special because it brings together 2 worlds that otherwise don't talk too much about each other. So we have semantics on one side, and we have software systems on the other side. In computer science, the world of semantics is typically equated with the worlds of formal verification, symbolic logic, all these techniques that give you a strong confidence in whatever you do. If you want to prove a program correct, well, you reason about its semantics. What is it actually doing? Okay. The problem with these reasoning techniques is that they don't scale very well. So proving a small function, 10 lines of code, maybe 100 lines of code, proving this correct is something that is very well possible these days. But scaling this up from small data structures, critical algorithms, to large-scale systems. Think about a word processor, for instance, or avionics, for instance. Okay, this can also be critical infrastructure. This is a huge challenge. So this is the world of semantics. Semantics, nice, solid guarantees, but problems with scaling. The other side is the world of software systems. Well, this is folks who actually build large-scale software systems. Think the internet, operating systems, big stuff. Okay, these folks know how to build large systems and to make them reliable and all, because otherwise we wouldn't rely on them. But the techniques of semantics, the semantic techniques, are hard to scale there. So they cannot really apply them, which means that they have to resort to techniques with less guarantees, such as software testing, for instance. Okay, but in practice, this still works reasonably well. I mean, you step into planes, you use your laptop for anything, and well, generally speaking, it works well enough.
So let me just cut in. So the difference would be that the first example you talked about is formally verified. So there are very robust guarantees that there are no security issues at all in this program. While when you just test a program, there might be something you could be overlooking.
Correct. So we have the world of semantics, lots of guarantees, but doesn't scale.
Okay.
And we have the world of systems, scales well, but fewer guarantees because you cannot apply these symbolic techniques.
Okay.
And this is how it has been, well, for the last 40 years at least. And I say 40 years because I already was confronted with that when I started studying, but I think the problem is much older than that. Okay. So how can we resolve this? How can we get guarantees that scale? That is the point of the proposal. And the way I will try to do this, or the way I do this more precisely, is through a technique that is less strong than formal verification, but on the other hand, which scales very well, which scales extremely well. And this technique is called test generation. That is, we generate an potentially infinite amount of inputs towards a program, send this to the program, and then check whether the program does the right thing with it. This does not give you a guarantee that the program will always do the right thing, because there could always be some other input which all of a sudden causes the program to crash. On the other hand, if your system has seen millions of very well-crafted, diverse inputs and has always done the right thing so far, you have a much higher guarantee that it will continue to work well than if you have just tested it with maybe a small handful of examples. And this is the basic idea, that through test generation, we can get techniques that very thoroughly test existing systems in a much more thorough way than ever before. So this is the idea here. We can test systems in a way that is much, much tougher and much more massive than ever before, and thereby raise the quality of these existing systems. And at the same time, we actually do have techniques that scale.
So in very simple terms, you're building a tool that will test software automatically.
We will test software automatically, yes, but this is also something that is not easy at all.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because so it is fairly easy to say, produce random inputs which you send to a program. There's the technique of fuzzing, for instance, which does that. And fuzzing has seen lots of interest and lots of advances in the last years. It's really amazing what's happening in the field. But the thing is, if you just bring together random characters and send them to a program, essentially what you're testing is the program's robustness. That means how well does it deal with inputs that it didn't expect. Mm-hmm. You can find lots of bugs this way, which is fun. Mm-hmm. But in order to really test whether a program is doing the right thing, you need to overcome two important problems. The first problem is you need inputs that are valid. Mm-hmm. If I spoke to you right now and I would concatenate random characters, like this, for instance, okay? Mm-hmm. This would be okay for testing whether the microphone works. This would be okay for testing whether your loudspeaker works, because
I could hear you fairly clearly.
Wonderful, because this is totally independent from what I say. Simple sound will suffice. Yeah. Okay, and if I do this loud enough, for instance, well, I may be able to break the microphone. You see where this is going. Okay.
Yeah.
But if I want to test a computer program for whether it's doing the right thing, I first need to trigger it in a way, which means that I need to give it inputs that are valid. That means, well, if it were English, I would have to speak correct English, but typically these are computer inputs, computer languages, which means that I have to satisfy the syntax rules of the program, and I have to satisfy the semantics rules of the program. The semantic rules are rules that go beyond simple composition of words, that's such that a sentence actually makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and this is a challenge in itself already, because this means that I have to tell my generator what the syntax of an input, what the format of an input actually is. And the good news is that we have made great progress with that in the last years, with techniques that allow us to precisely specify that. And these are techniques that allow you in a small set of rules to specify what the input should be. Then you press a button and then our test generator happily produces inputs. The second hurdle, however, is even trickier, because if you want to test whether a program is doing the right thing, it doesn't suffice to simply send inputs to the program. You also need to see what the program is doing. Mm-hmm. And this means that we have to understand what the output of the program looks like. And there again, we have to specify what the syntax of the output is, what the semantics of the output is, and how to interpret all that. And yes, we have done that too. Mm-hmm. And the idea of the proposal now is to join these two worlds, specifying what the input is, specifying what the output is, and coming up with rules that state, if I send this input to the program, then this output should come out on the other end.
Okay.
So such rules then allow us to check whether a program is doing the right thing. If I press the print button, there should be something coming out of the printer at the other end. Okay. Yeah. If I just press the print button and don't check what's going on, then this is not really a test. Sure. You see what is going on.
So beforehand, as you've said, fuzzing was basically concerned with generating random data, while you are in a way still generating random data, but it's following certain rules that the program will interpret as correct inputs.
That is exactly it.
Okay.
Think of a web page, for instance, that you're interacting with. Okay, if you just randomly hammer on the keyboard, well, you may find a couple of bugs pop up after some time. Well,
if you do it
after a couple of hours or something, right? Okay, that's good. That's cool. But if you want to find errors, say, in your text software, then simply hammering on the keyboard is not going to help you, because, well, you need to enter the numbers right. You need to enter your tax ID, your address, whatever, all these things. And there's very specific rules on how these should be built. And, well, if you want to really test whether your software does the right thing, then you also need to check whether it is producing the right output at the very end. Whether it is, say, computing your tax returns correctly. That would be, well, Well, testing text software would be quite a thing for us.
I mean, it's a good example. What kind of software are we talking about here? What kind of software will your project be able to test? Are we talking about smartphone apps? Are we talking about video games? Or are we talking about, I don't know, software that is working in a power generator?
That's the beauty of our approach. It is built on the theory of formal languages, which is a subfield of computer science, which actually describes which strings of text or strings of symbols are valid and which ones are not, and how to specify these. And as long as your interaction can be encoded into such a sequence of symbols, then anything works. And a sequence of symbols here can be something like two computers exchanging data. So we can say, okay, this computer A sends a particular bit string to another computer over the network. That's one thing. Yes, you can encode that. But it also works for textual inputs. So when you're writing an email, for instance, it can also you can also use it for encoding graphical user input. So you can say, I click on this button, I click on that other button, and then I enter text into this field. This is also something that can be encoded as a sequence of symbols. So our approach is very, very general, and in principle can be applied to any software that accepts an input and produces some output, which, as far as I am concerned, is pretty much any software in the world.
Okay.
But of course, you first have to figure out how to feed this how to create this input, how to feed this input into the program in question, and how to access the output on the other end.
Okay. So speaking of languages that computer A talks to computer B and how to formalize that language, are these languages always following a similar pattern, or how will your tool be able to, I don't know, it basically, if I understand it correctly, it basically has to sort of learn a new language every time it tests a different software. Am I getting that right?
So there's multiple ways here. So either you go and specify this language yourself. Then you're in for days and days of very tedious work, because this is no fun at all. It's in particular as it comes to networking. Many of these languages by which computer exchange information are built not in a way that they would be easily readable or processable by humans, but rather they are optimized for size, such that only a minimum of bandwidth is needed for exchanging information. And some of these standards are very old and ugly, and it's no fun at all specifying this. So I could easily spend the money and have an army of students going through one internet protocol after another and specify all that. But one important point of our proposal is indeed to learn such languages automatically. And this is actually a major part of the proposal. How can we learn how computers talk to each other? What is the input language of a computer? What is the output language of a computer? And how can we learn that? And this is something where we have done significant research in the past years. The important thing is that we can observe how computers interact with each other. And what you normally get in the very beginning here is just a sequence of, bytes, characters, bits, depending on the abstraction layer that you use. And the question is, how can you find out which bits, which parts of this interchange actually do what? And we have developed a couple of techniques that allow us to track how the computer in question processes these inputs. And if, for instance, a computer gets, say, a string of 8 digits as an input, well, then in the beginning it's just 8 digits. We can see it's 8 digits, yes. But if it then turns out that the first 4 digits are being processed in a way that is different from the next 2 digits, and then again from the next 2 digits, then we already know that apparently this 8 digits is a composition of something that has 4 digits, something else that has 2 digits, and something else that again has 2 digits.
Mm-hmm.
And if then in turn we find out that the first set of 4 digits is being compared of whether it's between 1900 and 2100, and the second set of digits is being compared whether it is between 1 and 12,
Mm-hmm.
and the third set of digits is being compared against whether it's between 1 and 31.
Mm-hmm. I can see where you're going.
Yes. And then we do have rules that tell us what this digit string should look like.
Yeah.
Apparently it is a date. Okay,
Yeah.
good. But we don't even have to know the concept of a date here at this point. But what we know now is that in order to produce further inputs of that kind, of our own, what we have to do is follow these rules. So we create some more dates that all adhere to these rules. And this is how we can then create inputs that are valid.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So having a tool like that can automatically test your software, it sounds like a very big thing for the industry. Is software testing a big industry? Is it something that is happening before software release or after software release? I mean, is that something engineers do on a large scale to make sure their software is actually secure? I'm sure you've made some experience with that.
So, the state of testing. What do we have? So what we have is, as it comes to testing software, we do have companies that take testing extremely seriously. Notably, if you are building software that really goes out to the masses, such as if you go to companies like Microsoft or Google, you will find that there is a very, very big amount of testing that is being done there in order to make the software as safe and secure as possible. Okay. Also, if you are in critical domains, avionics, trains, heavy machinery, to some extent also cars. Here also you have a very high culture of not allowing things to fail.
Yeah.
So these folks spend a lot of time devising the best possible ways to test software, and not only to test software, but also, if possible, to apply automatic proofs, for instance. Notably, in avionics, we have that occasionally. Or, well, if it's critical algorithms, you throw everything at it that you can.
Mm-hmm.
In many application domains, however, let's suppose you are using some software in your city hall to process whatever. To process license plates or other stuff, all this software that is being used in public places. This is where testing is much less developed. This is where you have software that is tested whether it does the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the software processes things correctly that are sent at it, and that's fine. What is much less being done is systematic testing, in the sense that we not only try to show that our software works, but we actually try to find bugs in it, which would, for instance, mean that you try to feed it with dates that are out of the ordinary. I send you an electronic bill, and my bill, and I bill you the amount of minus 900 euros, whatever. Does that mean that now all of a sudden I have to pay 900 euros to you because I just sent you a bill about minus 900 euros? Yeah. Well, probably not. So I hope not, at least, okay? Or any glitch that might happen. All of a sudden, or whatever. Here's a person whose last name begins with semicolon, quote, minus, whatever thingy in there, which actually means that the name of this person might be interpreted not only as a name, but actually also as a computer command, which could, for instance, delete or alter databases or display weird things on the computer. There's ways to inject such computer codes into regular data, and if the software is not written well, then it may get in trouble with that.
Okay.
And this is something which is much less tested, Because the vendors want to show that the software works. The client wants to see that the software works. But none of them are necessarily paid for showing when the software does not work. And the vendor doesn't even have interest to show that.
So there's not really a culture of making sure it's very secure by design.
Not very much, no.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And the other thing is that the vast majority of these tests are all written by hand, which makes them actually pretty expensive to produce. If you want to come up with all the possible ways your software may not work, well, then you have to be very creative, finding out yet another way to break the software, finding out yet another way to break the software, and you're not necessarily being paid for that.
Mm.
So this is often omitted, which, on the other hand, unfortunately means that, in particular, if your software is connected to the internet, where you all of a sudden have parties whose interest it may be actually to break your software, that's when software all of a sudden becomes vulnerable.
Mm.
And this is something where we do not have enough of a culture at this point. Culture that means that testing should be there to prevent as many errors as possible. This is a culture which I don't see often enough. It's just that this mindset of your software possibly being attacked or possibly being misused is not sufficiently there.
Okay.
And this is something that in some way we, of course, will be able to change. Mm-hmm. Because if all of a sudden you now have a robot or an automated tool, a robot is a nice visualization. A robot that happily operates your keyboard and everything and does everything automatically day and night, 24/7.
Types away learning languages.
Types away, whatever. Learns the language of the program, happily interacts with it, tries to find anything it can find. Well, what happens if you unleash that on existing software? The good news is that it's going to find plenty of bugs. And the good news may also be that it finds these bugs earlier than an attacker would do.
Yeah.
A somewhat concerning news could be that an attacker may also be equipped with such tools.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
And that's something that we also have thought about a lot. The fortunate thing is that most systems those systems that would be most vulnerable, those systems that actually are not so well tested, typically happen to be in private networks, which means that an attacker first needs to get access to these networks, and these networks, well, hopefully, are reasonably well protected. And the second thing is that in order to find bugs in such vulnerable software, you still have to do hundreds to thousands of attempts, and most networks automatically detect when there is unexpectedly high activity from a single person, from a single account, and then automatically block access. So the defenders are in a better situation than the attackers at this point.
Okay. And well, say I'm a developer. I have some software on the market, and you unleash your tool in 5 years after you've gone through all the developing work, and your tool tells me that my software is full of bugs. And there are some bugs I really have to get rid of. Mm-hmm. Will they be fairly easy for me to discover? I mean, will it be like a very weird cases where I don't even know what's going wrong? Or will it be like, that makes sense, I can easily fix that?
That depends on the bug that you have. In many cases, it will be weird corner cases.
Yeah.
Corner cases in particular that tell you, that where you would think this would never happen in normal operation.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're in a world where you have attacks on software, and attackers do not follow the rules. That's why they're attackers. So it can be a weird corner case, but this weird corner case could also be discovered by an attacker. Yeah. But it can also be rather standard stuff. Very simple thing. What was that? My wife used to work for a company that used to do software for tire vendors for cars. And the software all of a sudden broke down because somebody had ordered a tire for the French car maker Citroën. And Citroën, the name has a 2 dots on the E.
Yeah.
It turns out the software wasn't able to handle that.
Okay.
And it simply crashed.
Okay.
Now, thing can be, this is actually dangerous because if such data that cannot be processed later on makes it into your database, then all of a sudden your software will crash the moment it accesses this data. So whenever your software starts and goes through the data, it's going to crash.
And it's going to cost a lot of money if you're
going to cost a lot of money if you don't do that. So and is this a corner case? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't hope so. I mean, why should a French character be a corner case?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe a Hebrew character will be a corner case. Yeah. Maybe some weird Arabic letters or whatever characters might be a corner case. You don't know this yet. Okay. Yeah, and well, of course, we anticipate this, and this is why in our research, we also focus on tools that automatically tell you under which circumstances the problem applies. And in the case of this Citroën automaker, we would be able to tell you that, for instance, that the problem occurs as soon as there is an 8-bit character in your input, because these extra non-ASCII letters happen to be 8 bits. Or we can tell you that that the error will occur whenever there is any non-ASCII character, any Unicode character in your input. And so we can give you an exact diagnosis under which circumstances the error occurs. It will still be up to you to fix things, though.
So if I were to summarize this very sharply, you want to make all software secure.
Let's say I'm aiming to make it. I'm aiming to find as many bugs as I can, and if there's and so not only secure but also reliable, of course.
Yeah.
So more reliable than ever. And if I can catch a couple of potential vulnerabilities in there before they make it out into the wild, yes, I'll be very satisfied.
Well, I can only say I'm sold on the project, and apparently you sold it very well to the European Research Council. So I don't know, maybe to other researchers that are listening in right now, because you have already managed to be awarded 2 ERC Advanced grants. What are some tips you can maybe give other researchers that will try to get an prestigious grant like this?
I'm afraid I only have anecdotal knowledge because, well, I have my 2 grant proposals and they worked, and that's fine. But there's a couple of things which I know from my own experience as reviewer of those grants, and I've also served on many panels that decide on such grants. And by the way, if you ever get invited to work on such a panel, this is absolutely great because it helps you a lot writing your future proposal just as well. So there's a couple of ingredients here. So for one thing, this may be a bit disappointing, but these proposals are judged, for one thing, by the quality of your proposal, and second, by your achievements as a researcher so far. So if you have a great CV, that helps. If you have not shown evidence of being able to address high-risk, high-gain work in the past, then it's going to be a more difficult case. Mm-hmm. The ERC publishes a couple of metrics that give you an idea on what would be expected. For instance, for an advanced grant, you would be expected to have been have served on a number of prestigious program committees and organized conferences, or undergone a number of important expeditions. As you see, this what you need to do very much depends on the field that you're working on. In computer science, unfortunately, we don't do too many expeditions into the wild, but if I ever get asked, I'll consider. So that's one thing. So you have to assess yourself. Am I good enough to run for such a prestigious grant? The second thing is the proposal itself. And the proposal itself is something which needs time and which needs lots of polish. and where it's important to make sure that you do not only talk to your peers. So people who are right in your subfield of research will probably perfectly understand what you do and why it is important.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the panel that decides on your grant proposal is not composed of such experts in your subfield. Well, maybe they are, then you're lucky. But it is composed of generalists who know a lot about various fields of computer science, but obviously not every expert can cover every field at the same depth. Okay, so you have to write your proposal in a way that it is understandable by what you assume to be a panel member that is some expert in computer science, and possibly even more so that your proposal could be understood even by somebody who is not in your specific field. If somebody from physics, somebody from biology, whatsoever reads your proposal, they should still get an idea what this is all about. They should not necessarily be able to follow you until the last page of the proposal, but at least the beginning of the proposal, your motivation, this should stand out.
Okay.
And this is also important because the high gain of an ERC proposal is supposed to be high gain not for you or your subfield, it's supposed to be high gain for society. So you have to sell what you want to do in terms of impact on society. Okay? It's not sufficient to say, once I have done that, I, Andreas Zeller, will have much deeper insights into everything. That's great. That's great for me. But unfortunately, that's not something that society is maybe willing to invest so much money in. Okay. And maybe the field of software engineering will profit from that. That's nice too. Well, there's many people in software engineering, so that's better already.
Yeah.
But if you can show that your work will have impact or could have impact on all of computer science, on all of science, on all of the industry, all of society as a whole, beyond Earth, Moon, planets, intergalactic, whatsoever. Well, try that.
We're not sure yet what kind of software extraterrestrials use. So
yeah, there will be limits at some point. So if you can make a dent in the universe, that's fine.
Yeah,
but that's something you have to understand. So be sure to put your work in a greater context. Okay, that's one thing. And the second thing is nothing is evident to readers of your proposal. So you have to explain a lot. You have to explain, why is my subfield important? You have to explain, why is my specific addition to the subfield important? Why hasn't this been done before? And why am I the best person to do this? None of this is obvious to people who read your proposal. So always think of you explaining these things very slowly and carefully to somebody who does not even want to read your proposal. Okay, so you have to engage folks. It's not so much the art of listing down facts, more facts. What's of more facts? No, you have to tell a story. You have to tell a story of how this came to be. Why is this important? And how would the world become a better place if you, dear reviewer, only said this is a great thing to fund?
And I think in your case, we can all imagine fairly well how that would better society, because software is everywhere today. And if we can make that even a little bit safer, I think we're on the right track.
Yes, but on the other hand, much of the effort that is being done in software these days, of course, contributes to help making the world a better place. Yeah. So for 40 years, I've heard how if only we would all formally prove our programs correct, how the world would become a better place. That is true, because, well, then we would have 100% reliable software. So far, so good. But the problem is that you would also need an army of PhD students and experts to prove all your programs correct. How are you going to do this at scale? How are you going to do this in an economically viable way? You cannot simply recruit half of the world's population to prove programs correct. And what are you going to do when these programs change? I mean, are you going to reprove them again? Okay, so as I said, there's problems of scale here.
Yeah.
Okay? And so this story is a bit old. If only, yes, sure. If this worked, then the world would be great. But then the world would also be great if I had a unicorn, or if I would have a rainbow-colored unicorn, or multiple unicorns, or whatnot. Anything I wish for, there's plenty of things that could make the world great. And at some point you have to ask yourself, how feasible is this whole thing, and what are the main obstacles that one has to overcome here? So painting a dream is great, but the challenge is to actually show that there is a path towards that dream, a path that is new, a path that seems feasible, a path that has a number of obstacles that actually all could be major roadblocks, we don't know. But then on the other hand, if there is one person who can get across these roadblocks, this is you.
Okay.
And this is essentially the story that you have to tell in such a proposal in order to get it compelling. Now, all of this sounds like, this is just an art of selling things or manipulating reviewers into doing the right thing. Well, yeah. Reviewers like good stories, I can tell you that. That's fine. But they are much smarter than that. They look behind the story, okay? They look behind the story, and of course they try to find the weak spots in your story, and their reviewers are happy to suspend their criticism for some time. So that is, they follow your story even though they live with your assumptions and they believe your assumptions for some time. But in the long run, when they're done reading, they start questioning again. Come on, have I just been tricked into something? Have I been moved into believing something? And then they question your assumptions again and again. So, in the end, even a fun story is not going to help you if it doesn't hold water in the end. And this is so. If you're lucky, like I was, and had a good idea, and thought about, hey, this could actually work. And then you tell it your friends, you tell it your colleagues, and they look at it and they say, oh, I like it. This could actually work. Okay. And then you show it to people whom you know who are super critical, and they say, I don't find a way how this could not work. Okay. Then you may realize that you're on a good track to something. And if you have something like that, then it pays off to go for the stars.
Very nice. Thanks for these insights, Andreas.
Pleasure.
I have some quick questions for you, which we ask all of our podcast guests. And of course, I don't want to exclude you here. So these are all cybersecurity related, of course. Let's start with the first one. Do you use a password manager?
I use a password manager. Of course, I use a password manager. I used to have one password for everything, but I gave up on this some 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm now following. I'm playing by the rules. I have plenty of weird auto-generated passwords that are super long. I have 2-factor authentication set up on all my devices. So I think I'm doing I'm doing well here.
Do you also use physical devices for 2-factor authentication?
I use physical devices in the sense that I often have to use my phone in order to validate things.
Okay, all right.
By the way, I have a story to that.
Yeah, sure.
So last Friday, when I got to the notification for on the outcome of my ERC grant, I was in the middle of a video call with a student. And I noted in the corner of my eye, there was an email, ERC result. Okay, this is it. I knew that. And I told my student, okay, please stay on the line, on the video line right now, and just in case I have a heart attack right now, please be sure to call the emergency services immediately, okay? Okay. Then the subject of the email just said, your evaluation results.
Yeah.
Okay, what evaluation results? I was panicking. So I opened the email and it told me there are there are evaluation results available right now.
Yeah.
Please log into the EU funding and tenders page. Okay, I log in. Password. My password manager automatic. So my password manager automatic fills out the password. I click a button. Fine. Page said, you have not used two-factor authentication. Please start from the beginning using your EU login application. Okay. EU login application. Turns out I didn't have that on my phone anymore. So first I had to open my phone and had to download the app again. And then I was able to scan some QR code and then I would get a number and then I could add the number. Then I could actually do these steps. And then I would, but then I would not end up on the page related to my proposal, but I would end up on some starting page, on some homepage of the European Commission whatsoever. And then I first had to find my proposal again. And then I would have to find out the process communication. And then I found a letter. And then I opened the letter. And in the second sentence of the third paragraph, it finally said, we are happy to tell you that your proposal will be funded.
Kind of buried the lead there. They kind of buried the lead there.
Well, let's say they added some drama to the whole thing.
I can imagine that those were like the longest 7 minutes of your life.
It wasn't 7 minutes, but it felt like an eternity, I can tell you. But then I was very happy, and my student was astonished how an established researcher like myself could all of a sudden jump up and dance on the floor, doing a little victory dance.
Very nice.
Yes. So far about two-factor authentication. Okay. Yes, I use two-factor authentication all the way. Sometimes in critical moments, it stands a bit in the way, but generally I feel very safe with it.
I think it's still worth it. So, second question: have you ever fallen for phishing email?
Phishing emails. Yes. Occasionally, I get emails from my supervisor. Well, supervisor, our director, for instance, and I no longer fall for these. That's good. But my first phishing email I got was from Tom Zimmerman, a former PhD student of mine, who now is actually the head of ACM SIGSOFT, the ACM Association for Software Engineering Research. Which is
the parent organization of the CCS conference, right?
ACM is also the organization that runs CCS and others, And I got this email from Tom Zimmerman, and Tom Zimmerman asked me, can I just contact him? Because he wants to give out some Amazon... he wanted to give out some Amazon gift certificates to somebody who was based in Germany, and because he's based in the US, he couldn't give these out. So could I just help him with buying these and then reimburse him?
Yeah, sure.
And I fell for it. I actually replied, "What? Are you really sure about this?" And then in the reply, I found out. In the reply, I remarked that he would never talk to me this way. So, I finally realized. But since then, well, good luck. Good luck with trying to trick me. I cannot rule out I could be tricked. Maybe this whole ERC thing was just a trick. Maybe this is just about how to steal my credentials so that somebody else can now claim 2.5 million.
I think by the time this podcast will be released, we will have found out, because if we send out a press release and the ERC comes at us and says, who's Andreas Zeller, then we'll know.
And I mean, this would be next time I feel a bit of imposter syndrome. I will finally learn that it was all justified from the beginning.
Oh yeah, okay, I can imagine. Yeah.
Okay, let me provide quick answers to the remaining questions, because I tend to give very long answers.
No, it's okay. It's very entertaining. I can only tell you that much. Question number 3: as a cybersecurity researcher, do you handle your private data differently than someone not working in cybersecurity would be?
I've learned enough about cybersecurity such that I would always be maybe a bit more suspicious about things. Some would call it paranoid, but I call it suspicious and with a reasonable amount. And yes, I tend to handle my private data in a way that it is more protected than what others would typically do. In particular, when it comes to whatever securing home network and everything. But in the end, I think I just follow good practices without having to be totally paranoid about everything. So it's not like I lock myself in a Faraday cage before opening my email or something. Yeah. That would be a bit excessive. And anyway, I'm just a normal researcher. So it's not like that. Like I have big state secrets that should be especially protected.
Okay. Speaking of home networks and being suspicious, are you a fan of smart home devices? Yes or no?
Oh, I am a fan of smart home devices when they save me some time. I happen to have, for instance, a smart scale at home, which allows me to automatically track my weight, for instance.
Yeah,
and it's a good thing. It's a podcast, so you don't see me, but yes, but I have interest in tracking my weight before it gets too excessive. That being said, the current state of smart home devices is, from my perspective, still so that equipping all your apartment or your house with smart home devices is much more of an adventure game than actually saving time. So yes, you can set up your lights such that they automatically turn on when you enter the room and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I think that the amount of time you save with that, in contrast to operating a switch, is so marginal. And the amount of setting this up, and in particular debugging this if it doesn't work, is far out of proportion. So if you have fun in setting things up like this, maybe because you also like to configure your computer, or because you like model railways or anything, yes, sure, then smart home totally is for you.
Yeah.
But if you want to live a life without having to worry about what your environment is doing, well, I would rather focus on other things.
Okay, very nice. And the last question, which may be the most critical one, depending on your answer. What do you think about cryptocurrencies?
I am aware that the vast majority of cryptocurrencies are in the hand of only only a small amount of people, which naturally gives vent to all ways that a small group of people can heavily manipulate the entire world of cryptocurrencies in their own interest. And I am a firm believer in democracy and the wisdom of the crowds, and I prefer to have currencies that have a wider acclaim and are more equally distributed than what we currently have in the cryptocurrency domain. And when you look at things like NFTs, for instance, you mean or what we have with the idea of combining cryptocurrencies and the web. It's pretty obvious to see that there's a small number of players who may or may not coordinate. Probably they don't coordinate, but the number is really small. Mm-hmm. Who would be in the interest of blowing things up in order to make some easy, real money. Mm. I'm very suspicious about that, and given that this whole market has little regulation, is so prone to manipulation, I tend to stay away from it, and I prefer to have my money in a currency where I believe that the vast majority of people will also accept it tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds like a safe choice. Okay, Andreas, thank you very much for joining me here. I had a lot of fun learning about your latest project and about your ERC grant proposal tips. Maybe we'll speak when you get your next ERC grant.
That might be after my retirement, I fear.
Okay, thanks for being here. See you next time and have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.